G'day, my name's Lloyd Grollum and I'm the Aussie Pastor. I want to welcome you to our program today. We're just north of Newcastle and behind me is the river at Newcastle. All the big coal boats, they come in through the heads, and just over there, one of my favourite places, Stockton Beach. Now there's a lot of reasons I like Stockton Beach, but one of the biggies is that I can take my four-wheel drive, let me rephrase that. I can take Hunty, that's the guy behind the camera, our producer director. I can take his four-wheel drive onto Stockton Beach and we can play. You know what? Stockton Beach is not just good for four-wheel driving. There's some beautiful little gems up here that very few people know about, and when you see them, it's just one of those wow moments. And so come on, let's get into Hunty's four-wheel drive. Let's get onto that beach. Let's play on the dunes a bit. Let's go discover these secret places that not too many people know about. One of the things that really makes me laugh, makes me smile, I guess it shouldn't. But you know, these city people, now there's nothing wrong with city people. I come from the city myself, but they go and they buy their brand new $100,000 four-wheel drives. They come down here to the beach for the first time. They're excited. They just drive straight onto the beach. Their tyres are at 40 PSI and they make about 10 yards and they get bogged. Listen to me, if you come into the beach, one of the things you've got to do is let your tyres down. And you need to let your tyres down somewhere between 10 and 20 PSI, depending on the tyre and the car. So we're about to head on to Stockton Beach. What am I going to do? I'm going to let my tyres down. What you don't want to do is let your tyres down so far that you blow the walls out. We want to go to about 15. And there you go. Do that to all four tyres, 15 pound pressure. We're ready for the beach. Well, that's a lot of fun. You know, I grew up in Queensland, spending my holidays at Fraser Island and Double Island Point. We're in our Jeeps. In fact, we're up at Double Island Point once. We got our Jeeps caught down beneath the tide and almost lost them. That's another story for another time. I'm a bit disappointed though. We've got up here and I found out we can no longer play on the sand dunes in this thing. And I'm a bit sorry about that. Amazing, isn't it, how few people can wreck it for everybody else. But that doesn't matter. We're going to go down to the shore here. We're going to go for a drive along the ocean front. It's going to be a lot of fun anyway. Come on, let's go. Well, here we are on Stockton Beach and we're driving up on this main road. It really does remind me of when I was young, up at Fraser Island and Double Island Point. Very similar actually, except here we're in really wild weather. I reckon looking out there might be 4-metre waves. It's really wild. The wind is blowing and it's not far off high tide, and so we're right up the top end of the beach and the sand is really soft. And I'm actually, let me check, I'm doing right now 30 litres per 100. So wow, there'll need to be a fuel station up the road here, but man, I'm having fun. There's a little place up the road I want to show you. In fact, it's the real reason I've come up here. It's a quaint little place. In fact, in all my travels around the world, I've never seen anything like it. It's called Tin City. So this is Tin City, and I'll tell you what, we are here on a wild, wild day. I reckon the wind is blowing 40, 50, maybe up to 80 kilometres an hour. I'm almost getting blown over. And this is an amazing place. About 200 metres that way is the ocean, and it's big today. And just behind these sand dunes are all these tin shacks, tin sheds. You know the history? Well, in the Great Depression, there was a group of men, they couldn't find work, they had nothing to eat, they were in a desperate place, and so they came out here and they built these tin sheds. I guess they lived in them, they fished in the ocean, and they survived. And these tin sheds have been here ever since. You can't buy them, you can't sell them. They've been handed down generation to generation. And an interesting little fact about Tin City, Mad Max, some of it was filmed here with Mel Gibson. Amazing. Just a little gem that no one much knows is right here on Stockton Beach. Now I want to show you one more. It's right up the end of the beach. We've got to drive there. I'm going to love that. And I'll share with you this beautiful place too. Come on, Hunty, let's go. I'm right up the end of Stockton Beach, the northern end, and I've come to a little seaside village called Anna Bay, and it is beautiful. But before I talk to you about Anna Bay, I've got to stop this right now, this shoot. I've got to tell you what's happening. The winds are gusting at the moment up to 100 kilometres an hour. Out there, those waves are up to 15 metres high, and the east coast of Australia has been hit by a 2,000 kilometre long storm front. And in the 15 years I've been doing television, I don't think I've ever filmed in more hostile conditions than what we're in right now. It feels like I'm in a hurricane. Anyway, Anna Bay, it is beautiful. I remember one of the great crises in my life many years ago. I had a Nissan Pathfinder. Oh, I like those cars. Great four-wheel drives. And one day I came up from Sydney, I drove up the beach, and I spent the day here at Anna Bay. I found solitude, I found God, and I found peace. It really is a little nugget, a little piece of gold. And you know, the Bible's like that. You open it up. In fact, the Bible's like Stockton Beach. You open it up, and you come across these little nuggets of gold, these little gems, and you find them, and it's wow, wow, wow. You grab them, you put them in your pocket, you take them home, you take it out. God puts those gems of gold in your heart, in your mind, and it just changes your life. And today I want to take you to one of these beautiful little gems, one of these little nuggets of gold that I found a little while ago, and I think you'll like it, but to do it, I've got to get out of this storm and go back to my shed. So come on, come with me. So here's the story. Here's the little gold nugget, the gem that I found one day while I was reading the Bible. And it's about Jesus. Now, I don't want you to turn off because I'm telling you a story about Jesus. We live in secular Australia. It is pretty hostile to any message, anyone trying to tell a story about Jesus. I get that. But I want to encourage you to at least look at this little story for just a few moments, because it is a gold nugget that has changed my life. And Jesus, who I'm talking about today, and I'll tell you this from my heart, is the most amazing man I have ever encountered in all of history. And I would encourage you that when anyone's talking about Jesus, just give it a go, even if it's just for a few moments. Let's look at this story. See what you think. Luke chapter 8, verse 22 to 25. It's only 4 verses. I want to read it and then I'll unpack it for you. Luke 8, 22 to 25. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and started out. And as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water and they were in real danger. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped and all was calm. Then he asked them, "Where is your faith?" And the disciples were terrified and amazed. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "When he gives a command, even the winds and the waves obey him." I grew up with that story. For many of you, perhaps it's the first time you've ever heard it. Jesus, with his 12 disciples, they're his followers. They're on the Sea of Galilee. I've been there. It is a beautiful place. I was in Israel just a couple of months ago, actually. And I think as I remember that time in that incredible country, that Galilee this lake that Jesus was sailing across with his disciples is perhaps one of the most picturesque and beautiful places in all of Israel. You go there today and it's actually a tourist resort. Now, I grew up in a Christian home, so I grew up with these stories. And I used to think of the Sea of Galilee, the Lake of Galilee, as this huge big lake that must have been like the ocean. Well, when I got there, remember I was there just a couple of months ago, the thing that amazed me was it's actually so small. It's up there on the Syrian-Israeli border. It's really the size of a small Aussie dam. But it was beautiful. And it's where this story occurred. And I want to unpack this story for you because I think in this story are some important lessons for your life, and particularly has been of great comfort for my life, for me, especially as I've gone through storms, because this little gem, this little gold nugget is all about storms and how you can face them and survive. Let's unpack the story and you'll see what I'm talking about. Luke chapter 8 and verse 22. One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and they started out. I actually went out onto the Lake of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, while I was over there. It was one of these tourist things, you know. It was, for me, to be honest, and I'm being honest, a little disappointing because we got in this big boat that looked really ancient, as if it was 2,000 years old, because this story actually is 2,000 years old. And we set out across the lake. We went for about no more than 400 metres out into the Lake of Galilee. They stopped the boat. They sung a few songs that I'd never heard. They made a few jokes, and then they came back in. And I think that cost us, I can't remember exactly, but I think it cost us somewhere around 80 Australian dollars. So I felt a bit ripped off, but I will give you this. I got a sense of this lake, and it's not a big one. And when Jesus said, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake," it wasn't a huge journey. It might have been a journey of no more than maybe an hour or maybe two at the most, but it wasn't a long journey. Now, I want to bring this story home to you and me, to our day. When you give your heart to Jesus, and I get that a lot of you haven't done that, I know that. But when you give your heart to Jesus, you start on a journey. If you like, a journey with him in your boat. And Jesus says to you right at the beginning of the journey, "Hey, come with me. I'm going to take you to the other side." And I must be honest that one of the great joys of my life has been journeying it with Jesus. And this story will tell you why it's so important to journey your life with Jesus. In fact, I look at my fellow Aussies and I think we're pretty much the same as most people in the West. One of the great weaknesses of our culture, and one of the things that's really hurting us, is that we are not journeying life with Jesus. You are. Now, again, I get that most of you may not accept this or understand it, but I'll tell you something. You are designed to journey life with Jesus. And if you journey life with Jesus, no matter what it throws at you, you'll be okay. But if you journey life without Jesus, then as the world just throws all sorts of crises and challenges and disasters at you, you kind of wilt and you bend over. And many people just don't make the journey. So this story is important. Let's go on. Luke chapter 8, verse 23. As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water and they were in real danger. Now, when I was there, to be honest, the Sea of Galilee, this lake, it was as calm as calm. You know, I grew up a water skier. It was a sport that my family was into. My dad was into it. I remember he went and built a flat bottom, it's called a flat bottom SK ski boat. with a 427 Chev in it. This was a state-of-the-art, it was a Mickey Thompson designed engine. If you know anything about engines, this is a huge V8 out of the United States of America. And we learnt to ski behind this thing that would do the best part of 160 kilometres, 100 mile an hour. And so skiing is in my blood. I could barefoot at a young age. I've been skiing all my life. And so when I went to the Sea of Galilee, the Lake of Galilee, I was amazed at how smooth it was. I actually said to our cameraman, our producer director, Andrew Hunty, I said, mate, this would be a great lake to ski on. It was that smooth. But you know, apparently, and we never saw it, I kind of wish I had it. Apparently, at times, the wind can whistle down off the Golan Heights onto that sea, onto that small lake, and it can rip up a storm that is something to behold, and many people have lost their lives on that lake. And so when the disciples are in that boat and the storm comes up, they had good reason to fear. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever been in a storm at sea. If you haven't, you will never understand the fear. I have. I've been in a couple. On my honeymoon, we went on this huge $80,000, $90,000 Royal Caribbean ship. We went down the coast of Australia, across to Tasmania, over to South Australia and back home again. A wonderful trip. But when we were going from Adelaide round the bottom of Tassie and back up to Hobart, we got caught in a massive storm. I thought it was fabulous. My wife went downstairs into the room and she was seasick and she was struggling, and I'm up in the dining room, which overlooks the front of the ship, and I'm eating my heart out and I'm just enjoying as I'm watching these 10, 15 metre waves. It was a huge storm. Crash over the top of this huge 80-ton liner and splash water everywhere. There was no fear on that trip for me in that liner. There's a lot of sickness with my wife and many others, but not for me. But I remember one day my dad bought a boat, a sailing boat, 23-foot hood. It was in the Brisbane River, and we had to take it out of the Brisbane River. We had to take it down the coast to where we lived at Redland Bay. And so we chose a Sunday. It seemed to be a beautiful day. We went out the Brisbane River. We got into Redland Bay. It's very shallow. And so when a storm hits that bay, the waves are close together and they're very steep. And a raging storm hit us, and it was a big deal. And I remember the waves crashing over the front. And I remember the fear I felt, and I was actually steering the boat. And I beckoned my dad, and I said, you better take it from here. I was scared. I don't know whether I've ever been quite as afraid as I was that day. And he turned the boat around, and we surfed, because we were now sailing and following waves. We surfed all the way back to the Brisbane River. And I remember as we went into the Brisbane River, I felt so relieved that we had made it back safely to shore. So because I have experienced that, I get the fear that the disciples had. Now let's bring it into your life, into my life. You're in the boat with Jesus. You've made a decision to do life with him, and you are sailing through life with him, and you hit a storm. Now, there are many storms in life that you can hit. Some of them, I think, are life-threatening. I've never had this happen to me, but I've seen some of my friends who are very successful businessmen go broke. And it's very confronting, and it's very challenging, and it's a real life storm. And you know what? Some people don't make it through that storm, and it is something to be afraid of. I've seen people go through divorce. What a storm. What a challenge. Waves crashing over the bow of your boat filling up with water. You are sinking and you are about to drown. In fact, let me tell you something. I went through a divorce. It's the worst storm I have ever encountered. To lose my wife, my family, my 2 daughters, living apart from me, all of a sudden, after 15 years, by myself. I remember out here in this shed where I live, one Christmas Eve, the first Christmas apart from my wife and my family, my girls, sitting here with my dog Lucky, just her and me and no one. and it was confronting and it was challenging. I went out onto my grass lawn one day and I looked up into the sky and I said, God, I don't think I can take this. My ship was sinking. It was fierce. And sometimes, even if you have Jesus in your life and you've asked him to come into your boat, it can seem like Jesus is asleep in the storm and you can't get through to him and there's no reply and you feel like you're completely on your own. You are, I was, we know what it is to be perishing. We're only in the middle of the story. Watch this. Verse 23. The disciples went and woke Jesus, shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves. And suddenly the storm stopped and all was calm. So the disciples did the right thing. They're stuck in this storm. The waves are crashing over the boat is sinking, and rather than just drown, they looked, they saw Jesus was sleeping, they went and they woke him up and they said, Master, Master, we're drowning, the storm is fierce, we're going to perish, save us, save us. And I'm telling you right now, and you need to hear this, if you're in a place, in a bad place, if you're in a storm, if the waves are crashing over your boat and you are sinking and it doesn't matter what the storm is, you can bring the storm upon yourself, upon your own life. That's okay. Maybe someone else has brought the storm to you. It's not your fault at all. That's okay too. It doesn't matter where the storm comes from. It doesn't matter why the storm is here in your life. None of that stuff matters. What you do need to do is do what the disciples did. They went to Jesus and they cried out for help. One thing I did in my divorce, and I did this consistently over and over and over, is when I was in trouble, I went to Jesus. I cried out for help. And just as he heard the disciples, he heard me. Now look at this. Verse 24. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped and all was calm. I want to make this guarantee to you. No storm goes forever. No storm lasts forever. My divorce, it did not last. The storm did not go on forever. If you're going broke, that storm won't go on forever. If your work life is really bad, that storm won't go on forever. If you've got shocking relationships, that storm won't go on forever if you go to Jesus. Did you hear me? If you go to Jesus, you don't have to know Jesus. You don't even really need to believe in Jesus that much. Just go to him and ask for help. And do you know how you ask for help? You say, Jesus, save me. That's it. Jesus, save me. The disciples went to Jesus. It wasn't a deep theological discussion. They weren't at church and they weren't in worship. They were in a boat, they were in a storm, and they're in massive trouble. And they just cried out, Jesus, save me. You just need to do the same thing. Jesus, save me. I'm going through my divorce. Jesus, save me when things aren't working out at church. Jesus, save me when I'm under pressure with friends. Jesus, save me when I'm under financial pressure and it doesn't look like I'm going to make it. And I know what that's like. Jesus, save me. And when you pray that prayer, Jesus will hear you and Jesus will come and Jesus will act and Jesus will save you and Jesus will calm the storm. That's a fact. He will calm the storm in his time when he is ready, which is always the right time for you. Now look at this, because this is where the story reaches a climax. People think, oh, the climax of this story is when Jesus calms. No, it's not. It's not when Jesus calms the storm. It's in verse 25. So Jesus has calmed the storm as he will calm the storm in your life. And then he says this. He said to them, where is your faith? And the disciples were terrified and amazed. Who is this man, they asked each other. When he gives a command, even the wind and the waves obey him. The disciples are overcome by the power of Jesus to calm the storm. But Jesus, it seems, is almost irritated. He calms the storm and then he looks at them He says, where's your faith? And that seems so unfair. Look at it. The disciples get into a storm. You get into a storm. The disciples go to Jesus. You go to Jesus. Jesus hears the disciples. Jesus hears you. Jesus calms their storm. Jesus will calm your storm. What have they done wrong? Jesus says, where is your faith? He's a little bit irritated. What have the disciples done wrong? I love to ask this question when I teach this little story and I unpack it in church or when I'm visiting somewhere. Why is Jesus irritated with the disciples? It seems like they've done everything right. Well, the answer is in the text. And if we're doing a Bible study class, I'd get you all in a circle and I'd have my whiteboard behind me and I'd ask you, why is Jesus irritated? And I'd take your answers. And you get a lot of good answers, but I can't do that here. But what I can do is I can show you what the text says. Luke chapter 8, verse 22. One day Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross over to the other side of the lake. Verse 24, then the disciples went and woke him up shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. You getting anything yet? Jesus says, let's cross over to the other side of the lake. And the disciples wake Jesus up and go, Master, Master, we're going to drown. Jesus had already told the disciples they were going to the other side. They were never going to drown. And this is why I love Jesus, and this is why this story is such a little nugget of gold. It's such a gem. When you invite Jesus into your heart, he's telling you that you are going to the other side. You might say, I've got a fatal disease and I've got cancer and I'm dying. Jesus is not here, I'm not going to the other side. Hey, the other side is not on this earth. The other side is when we get to heaven. And when Jesus tells you you are going to the other side, you can take it to the bank, you are going to the other side. If you want more information on this subject, then go to AussiePastor.com. My name's Lloyd Grolleman. I am the Aussie Pastor, and I love you so much. I really do. But Jesus, he loves you heaps more.
Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo.